Welcome to our February, I was going to say 13th, but it's February 11th, 2014 study session. We will begin with assignments for Thursday night. Councilmember Ray, if you could accept the assignment to introduce the Scouts. Councilmember Peterson, if you could do the agenda item number 1, Pillar of the Month. Agenda item number 2, recognition of Vance Gray. Councilmember Cooper. And then Councilmember Daniels, agenda item number 3, presentation of our Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. Any questions? Does that work? We'll take a few minutes in preparation for Thursday night and see if there are any of the agenda items the team would like to have discussed before we move to 2 of the reasons why we're having this special study session today on agenda items 2 and 3. So related to Thursday night, are there some agenda items that you'd like to discuss? Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, there's so many I'm still working through. I'll reserve my questions. Staff have been very helpful, so I'll just talk to them. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Bray. Vice Mayor Cook. Okay. Councilmember Daniels. Kyle and team.
No, Mayor, sorry.
Thank you. I had made a request, and yes, our strategy has been on the public hearing, probably not to have a lot of discussion, but I asked Kyle on 30, 31, 32, 33, just the quick overview, not the presentation, the quick overview of those. Actually, it would be 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. The quick overview, please.
Mayor Lewis, Council, item number 29 is the 2013 Annual General Plan Update. What this does is it amends the General Plan land use map with some of the most recent changes, and it amends the circulation map to update the legend, collector street locations, and it shows a future interchange at Lindsay Road and the 202. We try to do this every year just to kind of keep the document fresh, so hopefully at the end of the 10 years, the update won't be as major. It's just more of a kind of a housekeeping item. Item number 30 is the Vestar rezoning at the southwest corner of Higley and Riggs. Item number 31 is a 5.9 acre rezoning in Cooley Station. The rezoning is needed to allow a place of worship or a church in the Cooley Station area, and it also amends some of the development standards that are attached. There's no general plan amendment with this. It's strictly just a zoning. Number 32 is a rezoning for Ben Franklin School. You might remember we did an annexation and a development agreement with them not too long ago. This rezoning not only includes the Ben Franklin site, but also the canal and some of the area around it. Item number 33 is 61.34 acres at the southeast corner of Higley and Baseline. The rezoning is to regional commercial. It's shown in the general plan as regional commercial, so this is a consistent rezoning. Currently, there's just county zoning on the property, so this will bring it into conformance with the town standards.
Thank you. As far as feedback, both from the Planning Commission, from citizens, it's just on the 30, the Vestar, that we'll have probably some detailed discussion on Thursday. Outside of that, what I'm hearing is the other items appear from your department too to be items that would make sense we move forward, and I'm not speculating on how everyone will feel, but that's what I've heard so far. Councilmember Cooper.
I just wanted to ask Kyle on that place of worship. I was kind of surprised that we needed to rezone that, and it sounds like there's a few zoning categories that require a rezoning, and is that something we can look at in the future and see whether it makes sense?
It is, absolutely, Mayor, Councilmember Cooper. It's something that we discussed, it was a while ago, and we need to follow back up on it. We're currently going through a look with our land development code on the different land uses, and that's one of the things that we're looking to expand across the different districts.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. And Councilmember Peterson, before we would move to our Parks and Rec master plan, staff is helping, you're making some discussions, and sometimes questions and comments help the entire council. Is there anything that you did want to take on the agenda for Thursday and discuss right now?
I'll just second the comment that Councilmember Cooper just shared about the the houses of worship. And I actually asked the same question, and they have said that they'll look at it. And so, Mayor, honestly, I'd be here all night. So we'll just leave it at that. But thank you for asking me.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 on the study session that we're excited to hear and receive that update. We'll turn to Rod on the presentation of the Parks and Rec Master Plan.
Thank you, Mayor Lewis and members of the council. I'm Rod Buchanan, your Parks and Recreation Director. Before I begin tonight, I want to first thank you for this opportunity to be here tonight to go over the master plan and to present the key factors regarding the master plan. But I'd also like to thank Denise Murdon for her excellent work over the last week, helping me with the presentation. So thank you, Denise. Really appreciate it. Tonight, this afternoon, I'll be presenting the draft Parks and Recreation Master Plan in preparation for your regular meeting on Thursday evening, where we will be seeking council approval. The presentation will cover some key points regarding the master plan to clarify what the plan is and how to best utilize this comprehensive guideline. We will talk briefly about the vision of the master plan, then we will cover an overview of the master plan components, including a menu of options relative to parks, facilities, trails, programs, maintenance, and also a brief overview of funding options with a key next step. There are 5 points I'd like the council to focus on and to remember about the plan. The first one is, as we go through this, that the plan is a guiding roadmap document. In other words, it's not a regulatory document. It is structured to be strategic, proactive, points us in a direction, gives us options to consider relative to current and future Parks and Recreation service delivery. Number 2, the plan is based on extensive, inclusive, and transparent community outreach, input, and data gathering. Whoops, sorry about that. There was at least 15 meetings with various stakeholders, including focus groups and community-wide workshops, as well as surveys and benchmark analysis with other jurisdictions. 3, the plan contains over 50 different options, 50 different strategies and over 200 different suggested options in key focus areas of parks, facilities, trails, programs, maintenance, and funding. Number 4, during the next 10 years, it's likely that other opportunities, changing community trends, or needs will emerge outside the options presented in this plan. And therefore, the plan should not be considered in future planning efforts as all-inclusive. In other words, the day after you adopt it, it could change. And there might be some new trends that come out that we might want to explore. And then lastly, the plan takes into account existing planning documents, including alignment with the Gilbert Strategic Initiatives and Council's overarching interests identified at your council retreat in 2013. The vision of the plan was developed by the Master Plan Steering Committee and the Parks, Recreation, and Library Services Advisory Board, which did a great job in leading the plan's efforts. You can read the vision there. It's a very good vision for this particular document, as it is a comprehensive guideline. Overall, the plan took into account community interest, efficiency, sustainable practices, with economic development and quality of life in mind. Separate visions were also developed for each of the major chapters within the plan. Now, as I said, in addition to making a positive contribution to the town's economy, environment, and community, the plan addresses overarching interests of the council, such as to have complementary and balanced services. We also heard try to strategically add services and amenities that add value to the parks and recreation system, to have a plan that allows for flexibility to changing needs, maintain what we currently have, consider the cost of deferred maintenance, leverage resources where small investments reap larger rewards, and consider regional collaborations and opportunities, all while being efficient and sustainable by using excellent business practices and maintaining the lowest cost possible. So with that in mind, what I plan to do now is go through the 6 master plan components. I'm going to only cover notable options that the plan identifies, and how I chose those options was basically if they have the large infrastructure implications, or if they represent best practices. So those are some of the things we'll cover. There are certainly more in the plan, but I thought I'd hit the highlights. So under parks, there are 6 strategies and 30 different options. Some notable options include, and remember that these are suggestions for our consideration. This is a menu of options, and I'll say it probably a couple times, that Thursday night, we won't be asking for any particular policy decisions or funding implications or anything like that. What we'll be asking for is adopt the guideline. So the plan suggests that we consider replacing or renovating playgrounds and other park amenities. Also, a consideration is creating new park classifications that are neighborhood, community, district, and specialty, primarily to provide for a more robust neighborhood park experience, provide a classification for a community park, which is 10 to 30 acres, that's not in place today, and to align maintenance responsibilities and other key infrastructure replacement issues. The plan proposes 1 district park is needed towards the south area of town. This is what we heard the community say. There are 2 locations identified in the plan as options for us to consider. Chandler Heights Basin, of which we already own 47 acres in the yellow, and an additional 257 acres may be available, and that's the red part, for a total of 309 acres. And the town already owns 80 acres at Chandler Heights Road, just west of Greenfield. Also, the plan includes options such as Hetchler and Rettenhouse properties as potential sites for a community park through public-private partnerships. It also talks about a comprehensive inventory of parks and facility infrastructure, involvement in the plan review team anytime a park is developed in town, and management plan for the riparians. The next section is under facilities, and there's 8 strategies and 32 options. The plan mentions that community input supported a broader distribution of recreation facilities in the south area of town, included a community center and a year-round pool, with Hetchler site named as a potential location. Options for these types of amenities could include private and public partnerships for new facilities, or with existing amenities or entities that have excess capacity. The plan also suggests that the town consider working with establishing partnerships and collaborations to support town recreation facilities, such as the Audubon Society, to establish an educational center at the riparian. Also to coordinate regionally to offer events within the town, and work with other jurisdictions to make tournament facilities available to town residents, with Rittenhouse suggested as a potential location. Under trails, we have 9 strategies and 38 options. The plan outlines a number of options for our consideration regarding trails, especially in the area of addressing gaps in the current system, such as rail crossing and unpaved areas. Self-directed activities are what I would call an unwavering trend in America. And that could be a future focus for us. A trail signage system is suggested that could brand our trail system, let users know where they are on the trail, how far they've gone, how far they have to go. In case of emergency, they could call emergency services and tell them what marker they're near, for example. In addition, the plan proposes the town promote the trails by hosting special events on the trails, as well as marketing existing trails, installing interpretive signage to celebrate Gilbert's history, and establishing marketable loops. Also, there might be an opportunity to establish adopt a trail programs as well as designated trailheads and linkages to other transportation areas like park and ride lots. Under programs, there are 17 strategies and 55 options, including developing a marketing plan, establishing a fee policy for strategies for determining fees, as well as program evaluation criteria. The plan also suggests that the town consider being more deliberate in placing current and future programming in categories such as core, secondary, support, and specialty. So senior programming may change based on baby boomer desires. Team programming could be enhanced, and both might be delivered through contractors or partners. A long-term program plan is also suggested, along with emphasis on partnerships and the department becoming a clearinghouse for recreation programs and services provided community-wide. Under maintenance, there's 7 strategies and 34 options. The plan proposes the town consider such items as establishing a reserve fund for park maintenance, clear standards of knowledge for certifications for maintenance staff, replacement schedules for equipment, maintenance guidelines, development of an asset and maintenance management plans, and obtain the NRPA accreditation, for example. Also, establish additional partnerships for maintenance. Maximize the volunteer and community service efforts through the addition of a volunteer coordinator position, and try to tap into the volunteer force that's in our community and expand the volunteer program. Also, explore the feasibility of an adoptive park program. Before I start with the funding section, I'd like to explain something that's in the plan regarding cost. Costs for the options are all displayed in the plan. But I want to point out that they're very preliminary and general. This is because there are many strategies and options outlined without clear and detailed information. In other words, these are conceptual ideas for the most part, and if we had detailed design drawings, then we'd know what the price would be. So the price tag in the plan I would point out are just preliminary costs. It's impossible to calculate a firm cost estimate. In fact, any large-scale project would require additional outreach, public input to determine the scope, maybe a needs analysis, market analysis, and the like. In the funding section, there's 5 strategies and 28 options. Excuse me. It involves ideas such as considering implementation of a long-range infrastructure plan, which we are working on, diversification of funding streams for parks and recreation services such as grants, partnerships, naming rights, and establishment of a long-term asset reserve fund utilizing public funding for those facilities that require significant investment and would benefit the entire larger town community. Now, as I said before, this is a guideline and it's a menu of options, and so I want to reaffirm that these aren't recommendations, that these are options. And so when we get ready to build something, if and when we do, there's funding options that the plan identifies for us to consider. And before we build something in the future, we would have to look at this list, and it may not be all inclusive. There might be other things for us to consider. A key next step. Last week, the Parks and Recreation and Library Services Board voted to approve the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, including an implementation and phasing plan as the next step, and recommended moving to Town Council for adoption, and requested that the Town Council authorize staff and the board to move forward with the implementation phasing plan as the first next step after your adoption. Because the plan contains so many options for consideration, staff is prepared to create an implementation plan for council consideration as the next step. It is important to note that it is likely that during the next 10 years, other opportunities or trends will emerge outside the options presented in the plan, as I stated before, and a comprehensive implementation plan that is updated often through communication with council and transparency will take all current factors into consideration. So in summary, back to the 5 points, I'd like to remind council that it's a guiding roadmap document that points us in a direction, gives us options to consider relative to current and future parks and recreation service delivery. 2, the plan is based on outreach that was extensive, inclusive, and transparent, and input and data gathering. 3, the plan has a number of different options, over 200 in fact. 4, the plan is adaptable to new opportunities, changing community needs or trends, probably most likely through an implementation plan. And 5, it takes into account existing planning documents as well as council's interests. The Parks and Master Plan is a guiding document relative to current and future parks and recreation service delivery. Projects will be brought forth on a case-by-case basis with the financial impact of the project fully detailed as we progress on any single item. On Thursday night, no financial or budgetary commitments will be requested relative to the adoption of the master plan. We'll be asking for council to adopt the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and also ask if you could please consider directing staff to proceed with the implementation phasing plan that the council could consider at a future date. Thank you, Mayor and council members. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Council members, are there questions, comments? Councilmember Cooper.
I know this is just the culmination of a lot of work by a lot of people, both on the team and on our larger community team. And so I know I just want to express my gratitude to everyone who's been involved from the beginning and even of late. So I appreciate all of that. And it is a thick document. There are a lot of options, like you said. And so I was keenly interested in this implementation plan or model that you're talking about. And I heard you say staff a few times, and while I think that's the appropriate place to start with a document this large and with 200 options in there, what is your vision for incorporating community input, and how are you going to chunk it, if you will, into manageable pieces?
Thank you, Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cooper. I appreciate that question because I did fail to mention, and maybe it wasn't quite clear, that the board wants to be involved with this as well. So the board and staff would work together, and anytime there's an outreach opportunity, we will certainly reach out to affected members and make sure that they're at the table as we progress.
Councilmember Peterson.
I also appreciate all the work that's gone into this. As I've read through it, there are a lot of great ideas in there that I think have a lot of merit and some great potential. So I am grateful for that work. I just wanted to also thank you for, I think, the wise way. I think you're recommending we look at this document as a general guide. And I just want to comment, though, just so that people understand, when we adopt this, it is a general guide, and it will be a great toolbox for us, but there may be some ideas we don't pursue, other ones we do, some that just end up being completely unfeasible. And so, I hear a lot of people talk about the general plan, for example. When I look at the general plan, I voted for it too, but I see it as a general plan that's, some things will happen, some things won't. So just so people know that and understand that, so that we don't have a lot of people misunderstanding how it will work going forward. But it's a great document. I'm still learning more about it. Thank you for answering all my questions, and appreciate the work.
Vice Mayor Cook.
I think we can also extend some thanks to Melanie and Rob and the consultant for all the hard work. I know I attended a couple of the meetings that we had publicly, and I think they were extremely well run. I know it takes a lot of effort to gather a lot of that input, but very impressive that we're able to get to this point, and we look forward to, looking at this as a template, as a plan for us to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It definitely was a team effort, so if I didn't mention that.
Councilmember Taylor.
Mayor, thank you. I'll echo the thanks to Rod and his team. I'll also recognize Councilmember Ray. I picked up the assignment from him, and so he did a lot of the heavy lifting and getting things off. The word plan in here, I just want to make sure the community doesn't assume that there's more to it than there is, kind of to the point Councilmember Peterson's making. And the reason I say that is because I think as we go into implementation, we'll need a healthy dialogue with the Parks Board to make sure they get the direction enough to go and sort of develop and work on these pieces to the point that Councilmember Cooper, because I certainly agree with that. We want, this is for the citizens, and they really need to have a lot of good input. And the heavy lifting is yet to be done. This is a great aggregation of data, a ton of data, and it's really well categorized. But in terms of a plan that we can just drop into the CIP and start cutting checks, we shouldn't assume that's really where it is. That's really this next phase, and I don't think any of us are under the illusion that it is, but it will take a good, healthy discussion between us and the citizen board, to keep it on track, because there are some things that we can probably move on right away, and if there's things in this budget cycle that are appropriate that we all agree on, I'd certainly love to see them in there. I'd hate to wait another year for some of these, no-brainers that we may all agree on. So I'll just offer a couple of those thoughts in terms of how we can provide ongoing leadership to serve the community in this area.
Thank you. Rod, give us a high level, best you can. Thursday night, let's make an assumption the plan is approved. And as you said, it becomes a guide, it becomes something that will help us take the next few steps. What do you anticipate between now and the end of December happening?
Thank you, Mayor Lewis and other members of the council. You can anticipate a phasing plan to be developed and to begin implementation. There are a number of best practices in here that are low-hanging fruit, if you will. They won't cost a lot of money. We can leverage our resources and actually get a lot of bang for our buck. I think that the Parks Board would be very interested in coming back as soon as possible. In fact, they've already agendized it for the first meeting in March to start the discussion on implementation plan, and then we'll bring it back to council and we'll have a running dialogue about what it is we should proceed with and what it is we should try to focus on.
Thank you. You mentioned the Parks Board. It was an 8-0 vote.
Yes, sir, it was.
And I'm sure, because that group had been very involved, attended a lot of the community meetings, received input, and tried to represent best they could. Were there any items the council should be aware of that, not that they were controversial, but caused good discussion, that the Parks Board did have some maybe compromising or working together, and then they came to an 8-0 vote? Were there some things that would help us in understanding for the future that good active discussion took place?
Thank you, Mayor Lewis, members of the council. Yes, there was two main items, and you've discussed both of them this evening. The first one was the fact that we wanted to make sure that these were guidelines and options, a menu, if you will. And I equated it to a roadmap. It's point us west, and we know we're going to west, but it doesn't say how or when, or actually some of the what is in there, but maybe might not be all of the what. So that was clarified for them. Also, the implementation plan, as I've heard tonight, you also think that will be important. They also think that that's an important next step to start the ball rolling, so it just doesn't sit on a shelf and gather dust.
Thank you. Any other comments from the council? Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Thursday, if not sooner. We move to agenda item number 3 on the study session, presentation on the Town of Gilbert Communication Strategy.
Good evening, Mayor Lewis, members of the council. My name is Carrie Bosley, the HR Director, and with me this evening is Nicole Lance, Assistant to the Town Manager. We've been asked to present an update on the town's communication strategy, and so we'd like to take you through the journey where we are today. As you're aware, we have an organization goal to develop an organization-wide system for enhancing internal communications by June 30th of 2014. Some of the first steps we took were to identify the current challenges around internal communication. This is not an extensive list, but it's more of a high-level list of current challenges, which include inconsistent communication with all levels in the organization, a lack of formal feedback mechanism, as well as a lack of information exchange. Inconsistent communication, and that may be not knowing what to communicate, how to communicate, or when to communicate the message. No formal expectations around communication, unclear roles for communicating information, and also a gap in owning the message. So then what we did is we looked at what are the interests, why is it a problem? And there is a need for focus around communication and alignment with our values. Communication is one of our values, and we define that through transparency, collaboration, and accessible information. Another interest that we identified was open communication channels with all levels in the organization, and to develop an input and feedback mechanism. And also to have a clear, concise communication, speak from one voice, one mission, and the one team. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nicole, and she'll talk about where we're going with the pilot.
Good evening, Mayor Lewis, members of the council. As Carrie's sort of set the stage here for the internal assessments that occurred to kind of get us to this point, now that we've owned it and identified what some of the issues are, we have an obligation to address those. And so what we've established is essentially a 6-month pilot program that's made up of a few key components. I'm going to walk you through some of those, then I'm going to give you a little bit more detailed information of how we're actually implementing as well as evaluating this pilot program. So first, we looked at enhancing executive team weekly meetings. How are we best utilizing that staff time? How are we best equipping leaders within our organization to be successful communicating within the organization? In addition to that, we looked at our second in command level. That's the next level down from the executive team director level staff. How are we utilizing them, and how are we best preparing them to communicate key messages throughout the organization? Prior to this, we had the second in command level staff involved attending executive team meetings once a month. We've actually enhanced that and actually established a twice-a-month meeting specifically for second in command level staff to provide some additional levels of development there, and I'll go through that in just a second. Supervisors were a group that largely within the organizations, the communication had been communicated from the director level down, and it was up to each individual department for how that got through down to that level of the organization. And so we've actually established a once-a-month meeting for the supervisors with some feedback mechanisms between all levels of the organization to both help prepare them as well as to help facilitate discussion and feedback among levels in that group as well. I'll touch on those first 3 segments, components right now for just a minute. The key area really in each of these levels, we looked at how do we best utilize this time? How do we maximize the efficiency of this time? So how do we address leadership development? So the executive team, you see both a focus on leadership development, communication to, but also feedback from. And that's not just from the director level staff. There's active facilitated conversation regarding feedback occurring in each of the departments, and how do we address that? How do we incorporate that within the organization? It's also a time that we utilize to prep for council meetings. So how do we maximize our efficiency when we come to these meetings? How are we getting ahead of the messages? How do we draw on the collective knowledge of that group to make sure that we're prepared? Second in command level staff, again, when we say communication, it really is two-way, and so it's not just a time where we go and communicate to that level. It's truly a time for feedback. It's a time for facilitated conversation, and so it's both information given to and feedback gotten from. There's also a component of leadership development. This is part of our succession planning initiatives, and so again, we're taking one level of communication and actually incorporating multiple initiatives across the organization into it. At our supervisors meeting, the primary focus is again to facilitate that information being given to, as well as the feedback coming back from that level of the group. The employees are a piece of this. That's largely where the supervisors communicate directly with the line staff. And so you might have what you call tailgate sessions. You might have weekly staff meetings. They're done in different ways to accommodate the different levels of work group there. Our goal is to equip our staff with a couple of different things to help them be effective in communicating, not just the information down, but how do we help them learn how to draw that feedback out from the employees and then appropriately bring it back up through the organization so that it can be incorporated and addressed and considered appropriately within the context of the decision-making in the organization. So a couple of things that we're equipping our staff with. One, we've established team sites, which is our term for our internal SharePoint sites. And so on those, we load presentations. And so if someone gives a good budget presentation to their group, we're going to load it there so other managers, other supervisors can actually access that and utilize it there too. That's going to get to some of that consistency that Carrie was talking about earlier. It's also transparent. It makes it accessible for all employees. Press kits are another item, and so we include actually at the end of every meeting a summary of meeting notes from that meeting highlighted with talking points, follow-up items, and then a clear indication of any commitments that were made by that group. And that's actually how we start the next set of meetings, is how do we do on the commitments. So we're actually tracking those. That's one of the performance metrics that we'll be monitoring. So one of the other options that we're working on putting together, this hasn't gone live yet. Again, this is a pilot, so some of this is still in the modifying and implementing phase. We're working on a tool for employee input that's actually sort of a survey format based on criteria, and so we're going to utilize SharePoint. It's something we have. It's not something we have to buy, but essentially to provide one more alternative for employee discussion. So employees have the option to go up through their chain of command. We have options elsewhere in the organization. We have these sets of very facilitated, very structured meetings. We're also building this in as one more component that will make sure that employees feel safe and have as many options as they need to effectively provide communication. So in addition to this, it's important to mention a little bit more on the performance monitoring, the evaluation. How do we know we're being effective? One of those is tracking commitments made versus commitments kept. So we'll be monitoring that. And the other one is really looking at the employee engagement level. And so throughout the pilot and then certainly after the pilot, we'll be looking to get a feel for how that's affected employee engagement and employee feedback. And so you'll start to see as we go through this, we'll be capturing what those discussions are. And so they don't occur in the vacuum. So if an employee comes, here's my feedback, here's the discussion that occurred at this meeting, or here's what's happening in my staff, that we're capturing that so that it's appropriately captured and incorporated. And so it's not a point in time where a lot of our research in other cities, there was a disconnect between, well, all these employees said this and nothing ever happened with it, which results in a low employee engagement. People feel disengaged or they feel like they're not being heard. And so it doesn't mean you can always respond to and incorporate every question, concern, or comment that comes up, but certainly to make sure that it's captured as part of the due diligence, if you will, before decisions are made in the organization. One of the other things I want to touch on just real quick, developing a mechanism for ad hoc committees for topics determined by organizational needs. We recognize that sometimes there will be items for discussion that perhaps need further investigation that might be specific to maybe a smaller group of the organization. It might be a targeted topic that's best investigated more fully by a smaller group of employees. And so we're building in a mechanism for that as those come up. And so you might see some of those pop up. That's something that rather than force it into a process where it doesn't fit, we're going to respond to that organizationally. We're going to allow for that to be appropriately given the amount of time that it needs for that level of discussion. And so finally, the enhancement of the internal communication system, it's essentially the process that I've laid out pretty quickly for you before. The key thing in this approach is that it is a pilot program. It is a process, not a single event. And so already, just based on feedback, we had our first second-in-command meeting 2 weeks ago. We have our second one this Thursday. We've already changed agenda format, topics, how the notes are distributed, and have also created the team sites and some of those other mechanisms simply based on feedback received at that meeting. So it's a very organic process, but it's a very responsive process. So as we go through, we'll be monitoring how it's grown throughout it, and then at the end of the 6 months, we'll be evaluating what is the best use of the time. Is it better for this to continue? Is this the right format? Are these the right topics? Are these the right groups? How can we do this better? And that's essentially how we plan on developing an organization-wide system for enhanced internal communication by June 30th, 2014.
We have a cool, I like it. Any other comments? Vice Mayor Cook.
Well, one of the things that I love is a culture where we are one team. And from accountability from the highest levels down to the lowest levels, I mean, at the end of the day, we're accountable to our residents and our business leaders and to each other. So this type of communication is outstanding. So I really appreciate that you've presented this to us and look forward to the pilot project and the results of that. So thumbs up.
So cool, I like it, and a thumbs up. Councilmember Cooper.
I like Prezi and cartoons, as you might have learned last time, so I'm enjoying this. Question for you, just on the kind of implementation side. I've seen, and I know you kind of mentioned it, but I'm interested in how this information, this new system gets all the way down to all of the frontline employees as well, and then how you'll get feedback to know from them that it's meeting their needs.
Okay. Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cooper, great question regarding, facilitating the communication all the way down to the line staff, and then also how do we get feedback from them to make sure that it's effective. One of the ways that we're facilitating the communication downwards is the press kits and the actual notes that are distributed from the meetings. They're specific to, here are the talking points you need to cover with your staff this week, listed out. And so how do you make sure that that happens? That's where, with each of these meetings, there's actually a portion on each meeting that references the other 2 meetings that are occurring, or 3. So on the exec team, we have a second in command update and a supervisor update. On the second in command meeting, we have an exec team update and a supervisor meeting update, and then the same thing for the supervisor meeting, so that they know there's a loop between each meeting. And so this came up actually at the second in command meeting. Well, how do I know my line staff are going to get the information? And that's an interesting question as a second in command or as a supervisor, because that is our job, is to make sure that that communication is facilitated. And so there's a couple ways to do that. As we get into these meetings, we're actively asking, how did that conversation go last week? And what's the report out? How is this working in your staff? And so if there are crickets, the natural next question is, well, did you have this conversation? Well, yes, we did. Okay, so there's accountability actually built into the structure of the meetings. So we end with commitments and we start with how did you do on those commitments on the next one. So that's one. How do we know this has been effective? This is one of the things that Carrie and I were talking about earlier today is, can we get kind of a baseline snapshot of employee engagement? Where are we at with communication now and then at the end of the 6 months to kind of have a little bit of a, I don't know how scientific that will be, but just kind of a thumbnail sketch of where we're at in the organization. The other thing is, to be perfectly clear, you hear this in the organization, and you hear it sometimes as council members. This is part of where this initiative came from. So there's something about the feel of an organization that as we talk to line staff, as line staff talk to other staff, and that kind of cross-pollinates between the departments, you hear whether or not the communication's working. We got really good feedback from the first, second in command meeting that they felt this would help them be very effective facilitating that communication down. We've also had feedback from the directors on executive team already that it has helped them facilitate that communication in the department. So,
Please.
Sounds like it'll be very effective in getting information down. What about the other direction?
So feedback up, and that's a good. That's another great point, Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cooper, regarding getting feedback up. The meetings, at least at the exec team level and the second in command, have not been quiet meetings, which is encouraging. So we're not suffering from a shortage of feedback so far. I don't anticipate that to happen at the supervisor level. If it does, that's where you get into actively facilitating communication and feedback. The other thing is, and this is where it really speaks to the organic nature of where we're at with this process, because we're just barely in the infancy of the implementation. days is what's working and what's not working. And so if we're not getting feedback from employees or supervisors feel like they're not getting active feedback, we can modify how we're approaching that. And that's surveys, is it different conversations, is it manager chats? You know, we're able to respond to the needs of the organization.
And I'll just add a couple things too. Items can come in from, you know, the supervisor meeting as well as the ad hoc meetings. And ad hoc meetings may be related to personnel rules or, you know, exploring new practices and getting those vetted, analyzed, and then also coming to a solution that then gets woven through the chain, and feedback then is given back through the chain too, in terms of what the decision is in terms of coming forward to council, or why something, you know, did or didn't go, and what is the business case. And so we hope that that's fluid and closing that gap in terms of the both from an input and also from a feedback.
Councilmember Peterson?
Is this intended to play into the CQI or process improvement as well?
Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Peterson, this is part of, it's playing into the talent management strategy, but we are continuously looking at how we can improve. So while this is, you know, it's a process and we're molding it together, you know, as we're having these meetings, as Nicole mentioned, we had one second in command meeting so far. We have not had the supervisor meeting yet, so we will continue to improve and fine tune as we need to.
The reason I ask that is because, pardon me, but I will refer to Adam Smith again in The Wealth of Nations. He talks about the fact that the line workers who are doing the actual tasks end up having the best ideas for improvements in process because they are the ones doing the job. So when I hear about we're going to work to try and make sure that feedback can make its way up to those who can make a decision on whether or not we're going to change process, I see a lot of potential in using that also to help improve our performance and our, you know, the way we do business here, and not just the relations, which is extremely important. So I'm just curious about that. If there's not a whole lot of thought to that yet, that's fine, but something I'd like to learn more about.
Sure, and I could speak a little bit on that too. We also have an internal idea management system where employees can submit an idea, and there's different workflows built in terms of how to execute that and how you know, if there's funding analysis to be done, there's different paths that idea can go, or an individual can just do it and move that idea forward. So we do have some mechanisms in place for that right now.
And Councilmember Peterson, to bridge off of that, these meetings, because they're so structured and they're so consistent, we have an organizational commitment to attend. As these ideas come up or as something is surfaced that may be appropriate for CQI, this is a great platform for someone else to recognize that and to help across the organization say, hey, you really need to put that into the IMS and move this forward. That's a great thing you're doing, or that's a great opportunity for your employees. I also like the idea, one of the things that we kicked around too is making sure that we're celebrating and recognizing our successes and also developing our leaders to do so in their own areas. So that might be an appropriate area as well to springboard off of that as we celebrate these. Hey, maybe that needs to go into CQI, or that might be appropriate, and also just to add to basically recognizing what we do well in addition to areas for improvement.
Councilmember Taylor.
I was just looking on the website under the strategic initiatives, and they have the different strategic goals and the status to try to put this particular goal. Is this more of an internal? I didn't see it really on that list. I'm just trying to look at the context of this goal in relation to, you know, what goal list is this on?
Sure, Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, this was one of my goals for the current fiscal year that I will report out additionally tonight.
Vice Mayor Cook.
The plan obviously is intended for the entire enterprise that we have. As it relates to our labor associations with police and fire, have you got any feedback from them as to some of the language that you're sharing with us today?
Mayor Lewis, Vice Mayor Cook. We've actually had multiple meetings with our internal groups regarding that with GPLA, IFF, regarding this system. And so the feedback has been supportive and cooperative that as we move forward to this, we're going to continue to have an open dialogue to ensure that it's appropriately addressing all employee concerns. And again, those ad hoc committees, if there's something that really is specific to a work group that's not town-wide, we do have a built-in mechanism for addressing some of those.
Any other questions or comments? Have you had, and along those lines, any feedback that has caused some of our team members that are part of this to have concerns that they've expressed to you?
Mayor Lewis, members of the council, the one that I spoke to earlier, which wasn't necessarily a concern per se, but it was more how do we use this with our line staff and how do we approach that group of the organization the most effectively. Other than that, the communication consistently has been, thank you, we're ready for this, we're excited for this, and in part because staff's, our approach, mine and Carrie's and the core teams as we approach this, we have core teams for each level with the executive team, and then we have a couple directors who have volunteered their time to work with the second in command group. We have a couple of the second in command group that are working with the supervisor group. Our approach as core team members is to respond to the needs of the organization. And so as a concern is surfaced, how do we address it? How do we make it something that we can, that we can work with for the benefit of the organization? So I think in part that approach, that willingness to already have incorporated some of the feedback is what's going to help this be successful throughout the implementation.
Then go forward and communicate. Thank you. To the council, we have a special meeting that is scheduled to begin at 5:25. And so we can end the study session and take 20 minutes to do many other things, or are there other topics with team members here that you would like to cover? Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, for those that served, and this is one I'm still digging into, we got 20 minutes to burn anyway, so hey. Oh, it's great. I wanted to know a little bit, just some feedback from those who worked on the federal funds policy. I don't know, maybe a summary of what that did or what they did with that. It is on the agenda.
And what item is that?
It's item 37.
Item 37, okay.
I just want to learn more about it. So, I mean, I don't know enough to beat anyone up yet. I'll work on that for later.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor, Councilmember Peterson, and the rest of the council. I'd be happy to address some of that. In terms of those, this has been certainly a cumulative process. We've heard some feedback from council.
Don, excuse the interruption. I know that's on here. Which agenda item is it?
37, Mayor.
37.
So, Mayor, we have been working with the council over the course of the last few years and refining our policies of responsible financial management. And one of the interests that was brought to staff's attention at the last council workshop was that of some consistency in federal funds. The town does utilize federal funding for a number of different items, anything from transportation projects to those community development block grant projects that we've been discussing with council most recently as well. Council had asked that we take a look at some of the interests that have been expressed over the last couple of years and come back to the council with the policy which you see before you in your packet. Most notably, one of staff's interests that we believe is shared by council is ensuring that there's an awareness of the impact of the acceptance of federal funds or any other funds for that matter as well. The council's expressed an interest repeatedly of ensuring that we are responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars, and that's clearly the case whether it's local or federal tax dollars. And so the policy that you see before you takes that into consideration. As we, moving forward, if council chooses to move forward with this policy, it gives a little more clear direction to staff in terms of what are the things that we're looking for? What are the things that we need to take into consideration before recommending the acceptance of any federal funds to council? What would any potential tax impacts be as a result of that? And then furthermore, what are we obligating the town to? So I believe what you'll see here is that as a result of this policy, we'll be able to more clearly communicate with council the impacts of the acceptance of federal funds, if there are any matching funds associated with that, any other impacts such as with Davis-Bacon wage requirements and such, that the town would be committed to as a result of the acceptance of those funds, and it allows then the council to make informed and educated decisions regarding those funds.
Please.
Was there any feedback from those who helped work on this? I was just curious. Jared, did you have any thoughts on this?
Actually, Mayor, if I may, I think, and I apologize for the interruption, we'd gotten some guidance from the clerk's office on this. There wasn't a formal committee that was formed on this. This was something that we had consolidated some feedback from council members to put forward, but we had, but because there was no formal committee formed, it wouldn't necessarily be there can be open dialogue amongst the council members on what you see before you, but it wouldn't be feedback regarding to prior conversations.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply there was a formal committee, just I know that there were some who gave some feedback and was curious to hear what their thoughts were.
Please. Informally.
Informally. Councilmember Daniels and I had good discussion with Don, and first time I've seen it coming back, and I think, I don't know if it's for today or for Thursday, but what I would ask is, what stops, what starts, what continues with our current practice is kind of how I would be interested in knowing how, Patrick, you and your team would sort of translate this into practice, and then that might help all of us know, what value this is actually going to be bringing, or what difference it might make, in our decision making or the information to the public.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. One of the things that I think this will provide is consistency in some of that information that's being brought back to council. As staff members, we are always doing our due diligence, ensuring that we're bringing forward the items that make the most sense to the council, that are really in the best interest of the community as well. This provides guidelines and some guidance for all of us to ensure that we're looking at them in the same way. I think one of the things that we find as staff is that we have our various areas of expertise, and so there may be specific areas within this that I personally might be used to looking at, and others might have better expertise in their particular areas. This provides that consistency to make sure that we've got those triggers that say, I need to double check and see if those Davis-Bacon wage requirements apply, if this would trigger additional environmental clearances or to be designed to a federal standard. Those types of considerations that for some of us that might not be a daily consideration if we're not working with that on a regular basis. So I think what you're really seeing is we've taken the interests that have been expressed by council, we've memorialized those, and then we'll be able to come back with a more consistent approach.
Vice Mayor Cook.
Well, Patrick, you're more than welcome to override and speak up.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Cook. Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, I was just going to add that
Did Patrick raise his hand and I missed it?
Well,
just kidding.
As we evaluate federal grants that become available and what is in the best interest of our community from a staff perspective based on guidance, general guidance you give us, and we bring those forward. From there, it's a decision the council has to make as to whether or not that is an appropriate use of federal dollars, and if we are to proceed. Hopefully what the policy will do will give you a comfort level that you have every time when these matters are brought before you. You have all the information that you need to make a decision based on that, so that, as Dawn had mentioned, consistency in the reporting of that information, and that you understand any conditions or strings attached to those dollars and to that grant.
Vice Mayor Cook.
All right, after Patrick is done chatting, I'll have my turn. Mayor, I just was wondering, because I do have a number of questions after reading the document, and I'm assuming some of us will also have questions. I'm wondering, related to just efficiency of our time, maybe the council could maybe provide written feedback to Dawn as to all our thoughts, because this is really kind of the first time I've seen it. I remember being with Councilmember Taylor and Councilmember Daniels about the discussion, but I'm thinking maybe we take a first stab at providing our thoughts and our feedback and give it to Dawn, and she can maybe collect all of them, and then maybe at a later date, you know, she can reveal some of those thoughts, because I could see that being potentially a long item for us to go back and forth and making changes and so forth. So I'm just thinking about efficiency and.
So in other words, you're recommending that we could have a continued discussion on Thursday, but not have a motion to vote on it, and feedback would be given to Dawn that could be compiled and brought at a later meeting.
I think that might be as an option.
Okay. And I think that would be entirely, we could leave it that direction. If there's feedback by Thursday, and there's a lot of it, we could certainly take that step, because I think we've got the flexibility. If not, then we could proceed. So, Councilmember Peterson.
I just want to, first of all, say that I agree with Vice Mayor Cook on that. I don't think there's a rush on this. If we need to take time to process it, I don't think there's any kind of deadline. And also, I think Councilmember Taylor's suggestion about getting some sense of what grants we've been accepting that we may not under this policy, any way that it might affect what we've been doing as far as some real-life examples would be helpful if you can come up with those. So I do appreciate that suggestion. So those are my last thoughts on that, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
Just as my understanding of this, and I wasn't involved in the specifics, but my understanding is this is more the homework that staff's going to do. This is not what we're going to take or not take. There's no decision that's going to be made on federal funds in general, no policy as to what we're going to take or not take, but this is really more of this is the homework we're going to do, and we're going to bring to you so that you can make a decision and know all of the impacts of that choice that you have before you. So that last comment you made there kind of perked me up a little bit because I didn't think that our discussion Thursday night, at least on this agenda item, was going to say, hey, we like this kind of a grant, we don't like this kind of a grant. This is what we're looking for as we evaluate grants personally as they come before us. Is that not true?
Mayor, Councilmember Cooper, I would agree with you. That's the nature of the policy before you.
And I took it as this is just a filter, and if it doesn't pass this test, then we wouldn't have it presented. If it does pass this test, then potentially we would have it in a council meeting for, as Councilmember Cooper said, discussion. Councilmember Peterson?
So I'm hearing two different things, and that's why I'm kind of confused. So to me, I know that staff doesn't suggest every grant there is out there. They decide based on some matrix, I don't know, to which ones to suggest and which ones not to. So to me, I think I'd like to understand what that is, and is this affecting that or not, as to what they might consider suggesting to the council. I mean, because that matters too. If it comes before us, that we got staff recommendation that bears on our decision. So I'm trying to understand also how staff makes their decision on which ones to recommend to the council. And so I'm not sure how to get to the bottom of that because I'm hearing kind of two different things.
Well, let me extend a sentence on that, because I think when this came up, it was possibly not formally asked for. You'd have to remind me of that, but it was some of the dialogue we did have in prior meetings caused our town leadership to say, we probably need to have a discussion about what are the steps we want to take. When would we proceed in looking at a grant using federal funds? And we may not agree on this, and so that opened for good dialogue, but I think this really came because we didn't have that. And so we've used the word guideline tonight for a couple of other agenda topics. So this is something that town leadership staff are looking at as to help guide whether or not they would proceed with a grant or not. And so there could be going back and looking, well, would it pass this test? Would we have used this grant? Would we have presented it or not? I think the group could come back on that. But that's part of my understanding as to why we wanted to at least take this step. Now, I could be wrong, so please clarify.
Mayor. The way I don't read this as a filter, I don't read it as guidelines per se. I read this as homework that staff is going to do to be able to provide us with full disclosure as any grant. We haven't given them direction on what kind of grants we want or don't want. We're the ones that give that direction. I know that staff sometimes will make selective choices, but we ultimately have the responsibility to give that. This is kind of a step between that decision, and this is really just to help us understand grants better. And so what I see here is not a vetting at all. I mean, theoretically, there's probably some vetting, but what it is here's a grant recommendation, but we're not going to make any recommendation without telling you all of the impacts that this grant will have on us and on the federal government and whatever else they chase down. That way, when the decision comes before us, we feel like we've got full disclosure, it's transparent as it can be, and then we, as a council, can decide where we stand on that kind of a grant. That's the way I read this.
Is that more in line, Don?
Mayor, I would agree with the synopsis as Councilmember Cooper
So
has
delete
presented.
my comments. And Councilmember Taylor?
Mayor, I don't mind the word filter or test. I mean, I think that is good. And Councilmember Cooper, here's just a thought, because I think your point about full information, that's definitely part of this. When you look at the grant space, whether it's federal or private or anything, I mean, it's just huge. So I'm okay with filter and test, because what that helps us to do is to help staff focus on the things that are, highly successful, directionally appropriate to our strategic initiatives, ignore the things that are less likely for us to either be awarded or not. So I think the benefit of that is for us to be able to give them some leadership, but definitely support the transparency thing. I think that's where staff would benefit from, a sense of direction, so they know what to prioritize. It's most likely to be beneficial to our direction at that.
And I'm just going to not rebut, but just follow up with my comment here, Mayor, if it's okay. I agree 100% that there are going to be some guidelines that I think we as a council will generally all feel good about, and then there'll be some that want to constrain it even more, and that's fine. Again, I'm getting back to the document in front of us. It provides no direction to staff. So if that's the intent, then it needs to go back with input from a real subcommittee or really the whole council. This just says, here's what we want to know about the grants. As they start coming to us, there will be two ways that they will start to understand where our preference is. One, by precedent, whether things get rejected or not based on the information that's provided, or outright direction. And so if the council wants to provide outright direction, I think that's a different conversation than this. This is just the homework, the information that we're all kind of looking for.
Okay. Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I think there's some great things in what Councilmember Cooper's suggesting about how this works and how it's designed. I merely suggest, though, that there is a filter in place already, and there's no transparency on it currently. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the criteria are that staff use to decide whether or not they're going to recommend something to the council. Now, if this isn't it, I'm interested in learning what that is so that we can all know what it is. And as a council, we may be fine with it. As a council, maybe we're not. But for full transparency and for us as the policy-making body to decide, I think we need to know what that is. Because am I incorrect that you don't, every grant there is out there you could possibly go for, I'm guessing we don't go for every single one of them. Is that right?
Mayor, Councilmember Peterson, there's kind of a nested question in there, so please correct me as we go along. To that last, absolutely, there are hundreds of thousands of grants out there, and so staff would be looking at each and every item to make sure that it was in the best interest of the community in their professional opinion to be able to formulate a recommendation to council. Now, on a case-by-case basis, that's going to vary. We have many, many different types of needs for the community, and those along with that would have many, many different types of funding sources that would be appropriate for those. Some of the things that we do on a regular basis benefit the general community. and we use general tax dollars to be able to pay for that benefit. So we look on a case-by-case basis at each and every need that we have to determine what is, first of all, how real is the need, what is the most efficient and effective way that we could possibly meet that need, and what are the most appropriate funding sources to be able to meet that need. So that's your basic set of decision-making tools that you have there. In terms of an absolute matrix for will we or will we not accept this grant, there are so many variables to that we really do rely on the professional judgment and recommendations of our staff members as well to look into that, because there are certain items that are related to construction. There are certain items that are going to be related to programs, those types of things, and each and every one needs to be thoroughly vetted. And to restrict it to a matrix, actually, it might mean that we didn't take into consideration something that was very, very important, and we want to make sure that we provide that information to council as well.
All right, so this may be a bigger discussion than I see. We're already almost out of time. I'm glad that we had it, though, because it's helping me understand the direction. And I don't have a problem with the document. I think it's a good first step. It's great information, and we can make decisions. I'm just not sure it's everything I wanted to learn yet. And so we can continue that discussion. I do appreciate everyone's input. It's all helped a lot, so thanks.
Councilmember Taylor?
I appreciate Councilmember Vice Mayor Cook's recommendation. So maybe that's a good next step. I certainly support that, and maybe a future study session is an opportunity to pick it up and carry the discussion forward.
And as there was clarification, Councilmember Cooper using that expression that this is the homework that would be done, we can consider that between now and Thursday night. If there was a feeling that it was...
Can I chime in on this?
Yes, Member Daniels.
Councilmember Daniels, please.
Thank you. Having gone through this process as a subcommittee, I have to say that I don't think we missed the mark as much as some others on the council might think. We really started from a place of if we are to consider a grant, what are all the pieces of information that we need to know? And that's what the document that you have in front of you. What is everything that we need to know about that in order to move forward? And so I think it's unfair to throw it out or say that it's an incomplete document when it provides exactly what we need it to right this second.
Councilmember Peterson?
I just want to respond by, that's not at all my intent. I hope it wasn't taken that way. I do appreciate the document. It is a good step in the right direction. I'm just, as we have discussion, it's helping me understand maybe some additional questions I might have in the future. I do appreciate the work of those who put time in this.
If you want more, can you lay out exactly, I guess, what you want the end product to be as far as what a subcommittee could provide to the council as far as what you would consider to be a complete document?
I think I might have to speak with staff more about, when we talk about what's in the best interest of the community, that's a very broad, I'll give you examples of things I would like to understand better. Best interest. Well, you know, we could have written a constitution that says let's do everything that's good and let's don't do anything that's bad, but it wouldn't have been very helpful. So we need to know a little more about what does that mean. It means different things to different people. And so I don't know what makes staff recommend one and not another, and it's just something I want to learn more about. Maybe I start digging in and I realize what you said, it's too complicated. We can't come up with the matrix. Maybe that's what I learned. So I'm not, again, I'm just trying to understand here. So I appreciate what's been done, and I think it's good. It's a good step.
Thank you. And to summarize it, I just take it as, with great clarification, 37 is the homework that our town leadership would do, and if we're okay with that, we'll proceed with it. If there are comments that end up getting to Dawn on Thursday night, Dawn, I think you'll report back to the council. I heard from 5 council members, and here's this feedback, and we'll need more time. We can bring this back. If, because it's homework and not maybe the criteria, the filter, and so forth, it could be to town leadership listening to this discussion. That could be something you could think about to see if it could be documented, identified, put in writing, and that could be for a future discussion.
And Mayor, we'd be happy to do so. One thing I may be able to provide in terms of some clarification, and I appreciate Councilmember Peterson. I apologize if I came across as though it's too complex. What I wanted to say is I didn't want to restrict it to the point where we didn't provide invaluable information to the council for your consideration. Really what is implied by this is that it's consistent with the way in which staff approaches every recommendation to the council, which is that whatever we're bringing forward to you needs to be consistent with the town's mission, vision, and values, that it's furthering our strategic initiatives, that it's meeting the goals that have been set before us from the council. So that's that overlay that we're talking about, that we're asking. These guidelines then further give specific consideration for staff to make sure that they understand and communicate those impacts of the acceptance of the federal funds.
Thank you. Ready to end the study session?
Mayor?
Yes.
Members of the council. Now that it's 5:27, there is another item that you may wish to address, and I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but that's item 5A on the addendum agenda with regards to the lease assumption agreement of Polar Ice. And if the council had any questions about that or wish to discuss it, we anticipate some attendance from the public, concerned ICE users. Staff is ready to do that, and I didn't want the meeting to close unless it was, intended that we not discuss it.
On 5A? Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Looks like we'll wait for Thursday. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to call to order a special meeting, and we'll entertain a motion to recess the special meeting and reconvene in executive session.
I motion.
Second.
Okay, with that motion second, the executive session will be in room 233.